Hey, this is Bill Rice on behalf of Age Lead Store. Today, I'm coming at you with a final expense sales plan, and we get a lot of inquiries at Age Lead Store. Hey, I love the leads. I love that they're affordable. I love that I can get a lot of them, so that I can do a lot of work and training. But how do I actually build a sales plan around them? How do I build a sales process around them? So today, I popped into my Notion, and again, in response to a lot of these questions, I just started to quickly craft how, if I was running a final expense shop, how I would start to craft my sales plan around creating a profitable final expense sales team, right? Delivering my revenue targets, hitting the amount of income that I want to hit my targets. So I'm going to show you a couple tools and how I would build that plan from the ground up. Okay, so let's start first with just who is that final expense customer, right? And it's important I like to write my sales plan down, so you can do it in Notion, you can do it in a Google Doc, whatever. But use this framework to sort of write your sales plan out, because it's really helpful in not only sort of delivering the sales process or building sales automation and some of your marketing that you're going to need to do around this, but also in your lead buying, right? You're going to make sure that you're buying the right kind of leads. Or if you're evaluating lead providers or talking to people that provide leads, you can ask good questions to make sure that they're actually giving you leads that are in that market or are the types of people that will need the final expense solution. So generally, this is a class of seniors, sort of 50 plus. They're often thinking about their beneficiary specifically, and we're going to talk about this. If you've seen some of my final expense scripts, voicemail scripts, email scripts, phone scripts, you know that one of those key sort of questions to trigger that particular customer into thinking about final expense is, who is your beneficiary? Who in your family, or what members of your family are you trying to take care of and make sure that they don't have to cover your final expenses, right? You're making sure that you're sort of accounted for your funeral and burial expenses, and that you don't put that burden on any of your beneficiaries. And we can potentially also talk about maybe giving a little of a gift, right? Doing a little more than just covering your expenses, but actually sort of giving them a gift in the end. Oftentimes, this category of consumer doesn't have the ability to sort of, create a legacy as far as an estate or anything like that. And so this can be really valuable to them. So for about the price, and again, I'm sort of pitching the pitcher, but about the price of a nice dinner, or hey, these days, even driving through a McDonald's drive-through, you can not only take care of your final expenses, but also, give a beneficiary or a couple members of your family a little bit of a gift in your final days. So that's who this customer is. That's the basic profile of them. Sort of common situations. We've talked about these a little bit, but again, they probably don't have a lot of extra income in order to accumulate a savings or accumulate a good retirement. They're probably living on a fixed income, and so they don't have a lot of margin in their life. But this is a great way to create some margin by again paying that little bit of extra and creating that margin on behalf of their beneficiaries, right? They may have something in place, but maybe it's not enough, right? You can have that conversation. And maybe they have something in place, but they, again, talk about that gift. I think that's a big motivation. The ability for folks that don't have a ton of margin in their life and are living on a fixed income to sort of create that financial impact, to not only account for their final expenses, but also have some financial impact and maybe lift up those that are behind them or in their family, are a part of their legacy. So they can create a little bit of a legacy with this product, right? So easy conversation starters. Again, as I'm building out, this is all to just build out like who am I talking to, and how am I going to talk about them, and make that persona, that person, to shape that in my mind so that it becomes a part of my sales activity, process, script, and those sorts of things. And it helps me to build out the other things that I'm going to talk about, voicemails, email scripts, and all those sorts of things. So anyway, easy conversation starters, and sort of the cornerstone of any sort of communication strategy inside your sales plan is asking them who is their beneficiary. That gets them thinking about who that beneficiary is, and it motivates them to want to take care of that individuals or those individuals, right? Are you planning? What type of final, resting are you planning? A traditional burial or cremation? You can talk about those numbers. A lot of times people aren't aware of that. They're also not aware of where that burden goes if they don't sort of account for this. And so a little bit of education here is super important part of your sales plan and building out this process and the scripts that go with it, right? And then sort of anchoring them in, because most of us have had this experience, right? Where we've had people in our family pass, and we've had to be accountable for some of those final expenses, or we've had to be a part of accounting for those final expenses. And that's a good reference point too. Like, how did you feel about that? Could it have been a different experience, a better experience? And maybe you didn't mind, right? But you don't want to put that burden on somebody else, right? So you want to give that gift of being prepared, so that you can create a different experience, or you can even control what that final experience is like. People are often uncomfortable talking about sort of that death conversation, that final conversation. So I like to focus on the beneficiaries, focus on the legacy, on the children. Again, focusing on that legacy and the beneficiaries. Okay, so now as we start to build out, so that's kind of the whole context, right? And this is some of the stuff that you've probably already got in your training and you've thought about, but it's good to sort of write this down at the top of your business plan. Like, who is this persona? Who is this person that I want to talk to? Who is this person that I want to fill my database with, right? So trying to make sure that I have a clear understanding of who the person is that I want to talk to, and making sure as I build out this business plan that I am going and getting a lot of those opportunities, a lot of those people's contact information, so that I'm constantly talking to and attempting to connect with people that fit that profile, instead of just boiling the ocean, dialing the phone book, or just talking to random friends and neighbors and saying, hey, does anybody, want to talk about funeral expenses, right? Because you're going to get a big, quiet no out of that, right? So this is an important part of the process, even though you've probably been over this ground quite a bit. Go ahead and write it down. Put it at the very top of your business plan. Okay, next thing we're going to do is we're going to build the plan itself, right? And this is going to require us to think about some components of actually generating revenue in final expense, right? So one of the things that I like to do is go to a spreadsheet and build a little business model, right? So in this particular case, I've already done that. Let me make this a little bit bigger so it's easier to see. So inside of here, I don't know why that control is right there. It's kind of annoying. But we'll sort of work around that. Okay, so I like to build this model, and we can get copies of this model. This is available on ageleadstore.com. Drop me a comment. We can kind of point you to where this is, or you can make it yourself, right? And one of the things I like to do in this particular model is I want to compare a couple different situations, right? And again, your business plan should come down to dollars and cents, right? I need to know how much revenue do I want to generate, right? Which I kind of did it down here at the bottom, right? So this is how much revenue that I want to generate on, let's say, a monthly basis, right? And I've done a couple different scenarios. I always like to put scenarios again. So you can see I've got, hey, I want to have 5,000 a month. I want to do 15,000 a month. I want to do 25,000. Maybe I want 50,000 a month, right? And these are things that you can grow to, but it does give you a full understanding of the spectrums of possibility, right? And what we can do, and we can kind of manipulate some of these variables. But again, it's good to sort of, even if you're doing this on pencil and paper, just kind of run the numbers and figure out like, hey, if I want to make $5,000 a month, what do I have to do to get there? Because by breaking these down, you will have a realistic plan that ultimately breaks down into the habits you need to create, or the things you need to do on a daily basis, the routine, right? It's really hard, and I'm not a big fan of like big lofty goals. So saying, hey, I want to make $5,000 a month from final expense, and working final expense, doing final expense insurance, right? Like, that's great, but how do I get there, right? Is that even attainable, right? Is that even a realistic goal? Just sticking a number out there because I'd like to be able to cover my mortgage and my car payment, that is not a helpful way to actually run a business, right? We want to figure out what that goal is, and then we want to back down and see if it's attainable. Or you can kind of work from the bottom up, right? You can say, hey, I think I can do this on a daily basis. I can make, I can make 25 calls, and I think 5 of those are going to turn into serious conversations. And I think I might be able to get, 1 or 2 deals, every week, right? So you can kind of go bottom up or top down, whichever one you want to do. But I think it's really important to take it to pen and paper and work the numbers, right? Or you can do it in a spreadsheet. So what I did here, just real quick to kind of go through this, and then we'll go through kind of building the rest of the business plan, but showing why this is important, is I said, hey, I want to make $5,000 a month in commissions. I know that a commission per sale on average is about $500 in monthly recurring premium, and then in order to get this 5,000 that I'm expecting for the month, that means I've got to get 10 deals, right, every month, right? I got to close 10 deals every month. Okay, so assuming that I got to close 10 deals, like I have a couple different routes, right? And this may not be perfect for you. Maybe you have some, leads. You don't have to worry about that. You have plenty of leads. But let's figure out how many leads I need to figure out, do I need to buy aged leads? Do I need to buy real-time leads? Do I need to invest in marketing? Do I need to do something more than what I'm doing today? And this is a really good exercise to figure that out, because otherwise you say, hey, I need to get 10 deals a day or for the month, but you may turn around and you weren't even aware, but you're only getting like 10 referrals a month, right? And all of those will not turn into deals, right? So you could already, be dead in the water before you even start the month, right? So let's assume this. Let's assume, right? And again, these conversion rates are based on leads, right? So purchase leads, aged or real time. And you can see this right here will change your revenue significantly, right? Just by increasing your conversion rate. But let's go like super simple. Like let's say, hey, just 1%, right? Because all leads are garbage, right? Let's just start with the premise that, hey, all leads are crappy, right? That you would buy. And so at a 1% conversion rate, that means that I've got to purchase 1,000 leads in order to get those 10, right? And assuming that for age leads, it's about $1 a lead, it's going to cost me $1,000. And for $1,000, I will get $5,000 in revenue. And that's a pretty good deal, right? For every dollar that I put in, I get 5 back, right? So that's not too bad. So that means my total return is going to be 4x, right? I'm going to be able to again, I'm going to clear $4,000 on this investment, right? So basically for every 1,000, I'm going to get 5,000 back. Once I pay my lead expense, I'm going to have 4,000 left over, right? So that's kind of how that works. This is also what's really important to kind of compare. Like I said, side by side, I'm comparing age to real-time leads. So a real-time lead is about $45. Maybe that conversion is going to be higher, right? So we could take this to 5. But you can see I'm still at a negative ROI, right? I have to get kind of a crazy number to turn that pop, to a positive number, right? So about 15%, right? So this again allows you to kind of consider some different strategies and figure out whether or not those strategies are even viable. And again, you can test your assumptions. If you think you can get 15%, then it probably makes a ton of sense to sprinkle in some real time and some aged leads, right? Won't have to work quite as hard, have a little bit higher conversion rate. The people that you're contacting might be a little more responsive, right? So there's all kinds of variables you can play with, but it starts with having a model. And again, you can do this on pencil and paper, but have something that's actually working the numbers. All right. So let's go back to our kind of plan. So the first thing is to build the business aspect of the plan, really back into the numbers and work the numbers, figure out what it's going to take for you to get to your quota, to the type of commission that you want to make every month. Whatever that goal is, really back it down to sort of daily incremental goals and what it's going to take, exactly how many leads. I mean, in most of the insurance business, it all comes down to how many leads you have and what you can do with those leads, right? So really work those numbers. Okay. Next thing is, again, we can go beyond that, right? So we talked a little bit, and of course, this Age Lead Store, we still think that's the most affordable, easiest, fastest way to fill your database with leads that are like laser targeted, right? They've already raised their hand on the internet and they said, hey, I'm interested in final expense. And so you know they're interested in that conversation. So we think that's the best way to go, but there are some other ways that you can go, right? So real time internet leads, and we talk a lot about what age leads are, but real time internet leads are, of course, the cousin of age leads. We think of ourselves as the affordable cousin of real time leads because that's what all age leads start as, right? It was a real time lead. Even the leads inside of your database that are aged or have been sitting around and are old, at one time were a real time lead, right? They came in as a referral or they came in from some source and they showed some interest, right? So age leads are just simply that, right? They are real intent. You know they're targeted because they've raised their hand and they made an inquiry. They said, hey, I'm interested in this particular product. And so that's super important, right? Because you've done a lot of that filtering. They just simply aged, right? So real time is an alternative to that. We kind of tested that in our model. We saw that it's a little more expensive. You have to have a little bit higher conversion rate, actually quite a bit higher conversion rate in order to make the dollars and cents work. But you have a model, you can figure that out. The other things that you can consider are sort of the more traditional sales and marketing. And unfortunately, a lot of new folks in insurance will start here and they'll bleed a lot of money, right? Because the key thing here is when you're doing some of these one-off marketing tactics, where you're actually trying to generate your own leads, that forces you to not only be a sales expert, which you're probably still working on if you're new to the business, right? You're working on becoming a sales expert in final expense. You're trying to get your scripts right, your voicemails right, your tone right, overcoming objections. You're trying to learn and figure all that out. But then you just added to your shoulders and to kind of this barrier to success, you've added this other skill set that you got to build, which is learning to be a digital marketer, right? Or learning to be a marketing professional or expert, right? And that's kind of tough, right? But you can go down this path, and some people are successful at this. I would suggest you do this later, right? Since you have leads that are super affordable and you can get, and you can just sort of start working on because the marketing's already been done for you, and you can just focus on sales for a second. I think that's the best place to start. But if you're more experienced and you're listening to this video, you bought some leads and now you're like, hey, I want to create a sustainable brand, or I want to start building out, a full brokerage, or I want to start bringing agents underneath of me, then it probably makes a lot of sense to start building some of your own marketing capability. And that's where this really comes into play. It's the second step, not the first. But the things that you might want to consider is targeted social media ads. I always talk about social media in a cautionary way because social media, if you think about just Facebook, because most of us have experienced that, or Instagram or anything like that, is essentially a feed coming through there, right? And they're controlling that algorithm. So you're feeding through things that they're interested in, and people are just flipping through mindlessly, checking on people's kids and their friends and all these sorts of things, or even, just silly things. And so they're kind of doing it for entertainment. They're kind of, their brain is probably shut down a little bit. And then you're going to insert your offer, right? You're going to insert your product or service and your benefits and all that stuff. And you're going to hope that they're interested in it, right? And then a lot of them will click because they're interested. They're just curious, like, what is final expense, right? What does that mean? What why should I care about that? And sometimes you could turn that into a really good lead, but keep in mind it's interruption marketing, and they probably weren't intentionally searching your product or service, right? Whereas a lead buy, they've already done that, right? They filled out a form. They said, hey, no, I want somebody to talk to me about this. Like, this is interesting to me. Or if you do other things like hosting webinars, you're doing consultations, right? Maybe you're doing some Google ads or something like that, where you're actually doing search, or you're doing content and SEO. Those are all things that will bring you an audience that's showing some intent, as we call it in marketing, right? They're showing some interest in finding out more. They may not be ready to talk to sales yet, but they're showing some interest. Whereas social media that's not necessarily the case. Also, email marketing, something you should always connect in there, even if you're buying leads. Make sure that all of that database is getting a regular email, right? Because those campaigns work really nicely, right? Because even though you may have purchased that lead or you have that lead in your database, emailing them will potentially get them re-engaged and show you new intent, right? So I encourage you to do that. So whenever you're working, final expense leads, whether they're in your database or you're buying them, it's really important to ask yourself a few questions about quickly qualifying that lead source, right? Again, and this could be internal leads, this could be leads that you're being given, by your team, or it could be actually leads that you're buying from somebody. These are some key questions to ask, right? Where do these leads come from? Those are going to help you build out your plan. Like, how are you going to approach them? How are you going to talk to them? How are you going to email them, right? So where do these leads come from? Ideally, when they come into your CRM, you're going to have a timestamp as to when that individual inquired, right? So if you're looking at old ones, not even talking about buying here for a second, but you're just looking at old leads, make sure that you're annotating, or when that lead comes into your system, there's some timestamp on that, because that's really useful in talking to the consumer, whether it's email or text message or phone calls or whatever. You can give them some context. Hey, I reached out a couple months ago, or you inquired on my website a couple months ago, and sort of giving them that sort of time parameter starts to help them sort of frame the context and to sort of psychologically flip the script on them and say, oh yeah, I did ask for this, right? I did inquire about this. I am curious. So it's a really helpful sort of mind flip there by having that simple piece of data, which is the timestamp of when they inquired the first time or when the last time they inquired was, because sometimes they'll inquire multiple times just trying to figure these things out. Do you clean, verify, and append data, right? So ultimately, in your CRM, you want to make that record as robust as possible. You want to make sure that all of the information is accurate, it's fresh. If there's an opportunity to update it, you get it updated. And if you're buying leads from a lead provider, they should be doing the same thing, right? Because they're building a robust consumer data record. And even though it's generated through the internet and the consumer has provided some information, there are opportunities for that data, that consumer record, to continually to be enhanced and updated and refreshed. So good question to see whether or not that's being done. And if you're maintaining your own database, encourage your company or even do it yourself. There's lots of solutions out there to do your best to keep that information as fresh and accurate as possible. It's going to make all your campaigns more effective, right? And then try your best to get a complete consumer record. Again, if you're building this yourself, make sure that you're getting all of this information. Anytime you have an opportunity to connect with the customer, validate and verify, make sure everything's accurate and keep all that nice and clean and accurate. But if you're buying a lead from someone else, try to get as much information as you can about that consumer. So at the bare minimum, we're talking email, phone number, ideally multiple phone numbers, ideally an address. It's going to give you more variety of ways in which you can actually use that lead. If you have a complete consumer record, you can use an omni-channel approach, right? You can email them, you can send them out direct mail, you can call them, you can actually knock on their door. It gives you all kinds of different opportunities to work that lead. So because ultimately you're filtering and sorting, and you want to be able to pull based on some of these data elements exactly who you want to talk to or you want to work on at any given time, and then build a campaign around them. Having a complete consumer record is going to help you with that. Okay, the next thing that's critical inside of your sales plan is where are you going to bring in automation? So this is super important, right? Because in this or any sort of financial services, business to consumer type of sales process, it's still a game of large numbers, right? And so you want to be able to cover a lot of ground. And while you're doing high value activity like doing appointments, talking to individual clients and customers about final expense, you want to have your sales activity working in the background. You want to have your whole database being worked. That will keep your database fresh. It will keep the maximum amount of opportunities coming out of that total data set. So you want to have in place some things that are going to be automated and are going to be working while you sleep, so to speak, right? So key parts here, again, make sure that you've got enough records in there. Again, this is Age Lead Source, so I'm going to remind you, right, the super affordable way to get thousands of records into your database for about $1 a piece, right, makes the ROI really easy to get. But the first thing is you have to have records in there, right, so that you can automate and you can get the volume you need, right? So we saw this here. If we want to get 10 deals a month, we got to have at least 1,000 records in our database, right? And if we want to get something like 100 deals, in a month, we need to make sure that we have a lot more. Like if we move this to, let's say we want to try to get 100. I don't have it set up. Bad model. But anyway, if I want to get 100, I'm going to have 10,000 of these records in there, right? So make sure that you have enough records in the database so that this automation is going to be effective. What needs to be in there? You want to build out a full sales cadence. So when we talk about that, you want to map out the journey that you want to take each of your customers on. And then from there, you want to actually build that sales cadence in a variety of different sort of tactical channels or automations, right? Most importantly, start with a drip email, right? And can be, you can build this in stages too. You don't have to build the whole thing to get started, right? You can put 100 leads in the database. And then you can simply say, for these 100 leads, I want to send an email as soon as it gets loaded in the database. Then I want to send another email 3 to 5 days later. Then I want to send another one like 10 days later. If I don't get anything out of them, I don't get a scheduled meeting, I want to slow that down a little bit. Maybe I talk to them every 20 or 30 days just to kind of check in and see if there's any renewed interest. Maybe I want to, again, this is all automated, right? Maybe I want to send them a piece of content that I just wrote, or a piece of content that I found on CNBC, or I found in the Wall Street Journal, or I found on some news site that says, hey, this is really important for you to consider, in your retirement planning. You should think about final expenses. In your estate planning, you want to think about final expense, right? So if you can find any sort of third-party validation, you want to add that to that campaign, right? Because giving them content, especially third-party content, is going to build up your credibility, right? Because you're keeping them informed, you're helping to educate them about this particular sort of component of their life, right? So start with the email drip campaign because it's really easy. There's all kinds of different software you can do, even if your CRM doesn't help you. I love QuickMail. You can use Mailshake as well, but you're just simply time-based email, and you're just writing those emails so that they'll go out automatically. It's also helpful because you're kind of creating a template, so even the ones you send out manually can be more efficient because you've thought about them, you've kind of pre-written them. And then the second one is a voicemail contact strategy, right? So there's a video where I talk about voicemail scripts, super important. That is your call activity, right? So go ahead and write that voicemail script. And either inside of that sales journey, inside of that automation, use something like voicemail drops so that you can automate that. Or even if you're not automating it, inside of the drip email campaigns or inside of your CRM, what you can do is you can send out an email and you can say, hey, then create a task to make a call. And then I have my voicemail script there. So you are sort of automating that. So you can also automate the building of your call queue by integrating these things. Hey, send an email and then set a task for me to make a phone call. And then after I make that phone call, then kick off the next email, right? So you can do some more clever things like that. Do the same thing with text messaging, right? Again, if I make a call and I leave a voicemail, but I don't get a response, it would be great for me to tell them, hey, I'm going to shoot you a quick text message right after this, right? Because it's a pretty common thing to do. I even do it with friends, right? If I call and no one answers, I don't leave them a voicemail, or maybe I do leave them a voicemail, but I'm also probably going to shoot them a quick text, right? I got the phone number right there. Might as well just go ahead and text them, tell them what I'm calling about, and what I need from them, right? Because they may not need to call me back. They can just answer the text, or I can text them and tell them to take a look at the email, right? So again, using these things together and then automating the sort of the flow. And so the first thing that's required, again, this is the planning phase, which is what we're talking about, is writing that down. So just grab, a piece of paper and write down what that ideal flow looks like. Hey, as soon as I get this lead, I want to send them an email and I want to make a phone call and maybe I want to text message them and then draw a little line and say, okay, what do I want to do next, right? I want to follow up with an email 3 days later. And then maybe if I don't hear from them in 5 days, I'm going to just call them, right? And so you can kind of build that whole process out, that whole sales process, and get a flow. And then you look at that, on that little piece of paper where you've drawn everything out, and you're like, okay, what of this can I automate, right? What of this can I pre-write? What of this can I templatize? What of this can I actually truly put into automation and let it work while I'm doing, real appointments and real phone calls, right? Okay, and then of course, inside of this sales plan, you want to start to script out your pitch, right? You want to have your sales script, you want to have your voicemail script. I got videos on all of these, but I encourage you not just to watch my videos, but look at some of these folks that just do a great job. So this gentleman in particular, young guy, he's making an impact with final expense. He's kind of in the early stages of that. He's only been doing it for a few years. He's really dynamic. He's passionate. So I encourage you to look at other people's videos and start to take little bits and pieces and listen to their calls and listen to their scripts, and look at the type of scripting sort of models and frameworks they use, and have that help you build your sales pitches and the way that you overcome objections. There's also some great videos about objections, even some things that mistakes that you're probably going to make if you're new to this business, or even if you've been doing this for a long time. Maybe you're making some mistakes because you haven't adopted some new technologies, or you haven't used some new techniques, or you haven't kind of adjusted with the market. So encourage you to not only look at my videos, but also look at some of these other videos to start to get some ideas. And the nice thing is, since you're watching this video, you're probably going to get some suggestions of some of these folks. You're going to probably see some of these thumbnails pop up next to this video because we're kind of talking about similar things. So do a nice survey, listen to everybody, get a style of your own, and then most importantly, write it down. So write those sales scripts down, write those things that you're going to respond to when you hear certain objections, and you're going to hear all the same ones, right? So you have a nice flow, you've practiced it. I always talk about using scripts like an actor. So you're not just reading them off, you're reading them, you're practicing them, you're saying them over and over again, and you're making them sort of your own voice, right? And then of course, don't forget the video or the voicemail scripts, because those are super important, right? Because those voicemails are going to be the core of your calling process. So hope you've enjoyed this final expense sales plan guide. Hopefully this gets you into a Google Doc or on Notion or on a piece of paper, starting to write out that sales plan so you have a clear vision and set of habits and activities you need to do every day in order to accomplish that bigger goal. So encourage you to subscribe, hit the notification bell, like this video so that you'll get more of this content. And then of course, check out Age Lead Store. We've got the most affordable way to grab some leads and get some of this sales training and start to execute on that final expense sales plan. Do it right here. Again, you can just go in here, grab account, start working leads instantly, because once you order, you get an instant download from the Age Lead Store, and you're ready to import them into your CRM and start working them and trying all of these methodologies and get those automations working for you. So again, make sure you subscribe, hit the notification bell, like this video, and we'll see you on the next one.